All right. Good evening, everyone, and good morning, Madhavika. So, good morning to those who are joining us from the US, or good afternoon if you're joining us from any other part of the world, depending on where you are. Uh, my name is Arpit Chaturvedi. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Global Policy Insights. I am also the co-director of the Global Policy, Diplomacy, and Sustainability Fellowship, which is a fellowship that we have started to transform the educational systems across the world, specifically in India, with the mindset that India is a country which needs more and more education around issues of public policy, diplomacy, sustainability, from an internationalist, from a globalist perspective, because most of the problems that we are looking at today, look at problems around air pollution, look at problems around water, health now, COVID. None of these problems can be solved by one country alone. And one country, when it gets affected by any of these problems, everybody does. So that's what our fellowship is all about. We get mentors from all over the world, people from the United Nations, people from the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, from NATO, various ministers, legislators, and Fortune 500 CEOs, as well as NGO leaders, to train the next generation of policy, diplomacy, and sustainability leaders. So our program is almost like a mini Ivy League crash course on public policy, diplomacy, and sustainability. We'll talk a lot more about that towards the end of our conversation. But for now, I'm extremely happy to have Madhavika as part of this fireside chat. Let me introduce Madhavika more formally first. So Ms. Madhavika Bajoria is the Manager Policy and Engagement, India Program Manager at the Sight and Life Foundation. She holds a Master of Public Administration and Economic and Political Development, Advanced Policy and Economic Analysis from Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. Along with Madhavika today, I'm going to discuss what it takes when you want to take a decision that, okay, now I'm in a place I should go for an MPA or an MPP program. I'm sure a lot of us have questions around what should I go for, an MPP or an MPA or an MBA? So what's like the right degree for me? Is there a difference between an MPP program and an MPA program? And how do you best utilize your time when you're there in one of these really prestigious institutions that offer MPP and MPA programs? How do you strategize? How do you build up your profile to get into some of these programs? So both Madhavika and I, we have been through that journey. I completed my master's in public administration from Cornell University. Madhavika did her master's in public administration from Columbia University. I think Madhavika graduated 1 year ahead of me. And then we met in Delhi, and we thought that, we get so many calls, so many questions on a daily basis on, hey, how do I structure my CV, SOP? What should I do to make my profile more competitive? So we thought that we'll just do an open session and answer your questions on how you can strategize to get into some of these great colleges. So first of all, Madhavika, thank you so much for taking out the time and doing this talk with us. I want to start off with, just a sketch of your journey. Just, what was your undergrad in? What was the journey like after that? And how did you end up deciding that, hey, I want to go for a public policy or public administration graduate degree? And what all did you do so that your profile was competitive enough to get selected into Columbia?
Right. Well, first of all, Arpit, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this, and a very good evening to everyone who's joining. I think I'm absolutely thrilled to see so many people taking time out on a Monday evening to listen in to a session on wanting to study public policy. And it's so exciting to me that there are so many young Indians who feel so passionate about wanting to make a positive change and wanting to spend their higher time in pursuing higher education degrees in a field that truly we can use to make our country and the larger world a better place. So really, thank you all for being here. I won't go into like too many. Arpit has already nicely sketched out what I do right now. So for me, from a very, very young age, maybe from when I was in school in India, I knew I was the thing that interested me the most academically was questions around inequality, injustice. And I think growing up in India in the early and mid 2000s, it was a very exciting time because we were seeing a lot of economic growth, we were seeing a lot of GDP growth, but then we all coexist so much side by side with poverty, inequality, lack of access. And that was very, very stark to me. So from a very young age, these were the questions that were very interesting to me. But I felt like my school curriculum in India wasn't really satisfactorily helping me answer those questions. So I went in for undergraduate degree in the US in a small liberal arts college called Bryn Mawr, where I was able to like really customize my curriculum. And customize my curriculum into like studying a little bit of economics, studying a little bit of sociology, a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of politics, everything. I was just following my curiosity and intellectual interest to basically get at, questions of, I wasn't even thinking in terms of sector, like, okay, I want to
Yeah.
work in education, I want to work in agriculture, I want to work in microfinance. I was really looking at answering these very basic questions that I think all development professionals need to keep front and center, no matter what work that they're doing. And luckily, I was able to curate a great curriculum for myself. And I was able to get a job after undergrad at a reputed international NGO in Washington, D.C. called CARE.
Mhm.
And when I was at CARE, that's when I started meeting like a lot of other professionals in the development sector who, were maybe 10, 15 years ahead of me. So I could see what my career would look like in a decade's time or 5 years time. And one thing that I noticed that everybody had was an advanced master's degree. What I realized was that no, I had good training in my undergrad, I had a good job, but really to progress in this field and to really sharpen that skill set, because like I said, in undergrad I was following a general curiosity, but I maybe lacked the specific
Mhm.
toolkits and skill sets in policy analysis, in understanding data, using data for policy making, understanding, like I studied economics, but how can the
Yeah.
concepts of economics be used to encourage develop to make policies that are equitable. So really what I was missing was that translation from theory and from academic theory into actual practice.
Yeah.
And everyone I was meeting as a young professional straight out of college was really encouraging me to look at policy school. And so
Mhm.
that's how I started researching policy school and looking at how it could further add to the profile I had already built for myself. So that's just a little bit about my journey. And then of course I wanted to Columbia was my dream school because I wanted to be in a big city, because
Right.
I knew that like that would give me exposure. Like the whole UN system is in New York.
Oh yeah.
A lot of development organizations are in New York. So I knew that like in my quest to want to link the theory to practice, it would make sense for me to be in a place where I would have more direct exposure to people who were doing the kind of work I wanted to be doing. So that's sort of a little bit about my journey, but more than happy to answer more questions.
No, thank you, Madhavika. So I think if I do agree with you a lot on the fact that, in India, especially in our generation, there has been this sudden surge of people who are trying to work in the public policy development space, which was probably not the case earlier on. Like, even if we talk to, people who were 10 years ahead of us, the usual idea was that you go for an MBA and you work for the corporate sector. And I think the larger realization has been that the society's problems cannot all be solved by private corporate organizations. So you need the kind of training where you need people with a very different skill set. So if I look at my own journey, I don't think that I knew that there is a degree called a Masters of Public Administration or a Masters of Public Policy. Well, until the end of my undergrad, in fact, probably well until the end of my first master's degree, which was a Masters of Business Administration from Symbiosis in Pune. Now it was only after that that my idea was, my undergrad was in history and I really loved the subject, and at that point of time I was a bit confused on as to whether I should go for an MA in history. I had gone into JNU, or I should go ahead and do an MBA. And after talking to a number of people, what I eventually found out that most of the people who are going into JNU are either preparing for civil services for God knows how many years. That's how they like to spend their time, and otherwise they go in for a PhD. They start teaching after that. And I was like, maybe that's not what I really want to do, because I was always a little more action oriented, and I thought that I'd be able to transform the MSME sector in Firozabad. That's my hometown with a lot of glass industry, etc. So I thought, okay, my analysis was that what is one thing in India that other countries don't have? Our comparative advantage lies in our human resources. So I thought, okay, let me do an MBA in human resources. But when I got into it and I came out with a consulting job, I got absolutely bored of private sector consulting. It can be really grueling, as you know. So after that, I was lucky enough that at that point of time, I had almost decided that I'd set up an educational consulting firm, because I'd studied in all of these different types of schools. But at that point of time, my dad got a ticket to fight for an MP election from Firozabad. So that's when I worked the hardest in my life. I left everything, camped in Firozabad for a good 3 to 4 months, and I was probably sleeping for 3.5 hours every day, but feeling equally energetic. And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is something that I enjoy doing. So I started working for the National Commission for Scheduled Castes for a year, then worked for a member of parliament for a year. And during that time, I started researching on the colleges that I want to apply to, and eventually, got into Cornell. So that's my story, just so that the audience, can compare that there are different pathways of getting in. My question to you is that, okay, when you started working, I think my experience was also similar, that all of the top-notch people in the field had advanced graduate degrees. Uh, what prompted you to go for a graduate degree? Like, first is, how many years had you worked before you got in? And the second is that, were you always willing to go to the US for this graduate degree, or were you also considering Europe or any other country? Let's start with that.
Sure. Great questions, Arpit. And I think for me, I was already in the US. I was doing
Yeah,
I did my undergrad here, and then my first job was also in
in the
Washington,
US.
in the US. But that being said, I did look at. I also applied to the program at the London School of Economics, because
Mm-hmm.
I think the MPA. So there are a couple of premier MPA degrees in a number of different continents. So Europe has a few. There's LSE, then there is the Hertie School of
Yeah,
Government in Berlin,
in Germany. Yeah.
in Germany, which has a fantastic MPP, and then there's one at Sciences Po in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we have to be mindful of the fact that European MPPs are much cheaper than
Yes.
MPPs in the US. So and I think in terms of the quality of exposure, the quality of exposure, the quality of the curriculum, because there are such few really high quality MPPs, MPAs around the world, I think they're fairly similar. So I think if it makes more monetary sense for people to go to a college in get a higher degree in Europe, I would I would
Absolutely.
absolutely encourage that. And I believe there's one in Singapore as well at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public
That's
Policy,
correct. Yes.
NUS. So yeah, I did apply to LSE and I applied to Columbia. So I only applied to two programs because again, I knew very clearly that I only wanted to be in a big city, because my undergraduate experience had been in a very small liberal
Mhm.
arts college in a suburban setting. And I think that was great for me, because I told you that was the phase of my life when I was really immersed in like ideas and thinking and sharpening my critical reading, critical writing, forming arguments. So like more formative,
Yeah.
but I knew that to add to that, and again, see, this depends on everyone's journey, right? So what I would encourage everyone here to think carefully through is what has been their journey so far and what is going to add to that journey, right? So
Absolutely.
at that stage would add to my journey was being in a big city, in a school with a big network, access to lots of people, lots of professionals, people from many countries. So that's how I curated my journey. You mentioned how you curated yours, and then for you being in a place like Ithaca made sense,
Yeah.
because you had already done the working in Delhi and being out in the field. So I think the key takeaway here should be for everyone to really think very carefully and evaluate their journey, because there is a really good a really good offering in terms of the kind of MPA degrees that are out there, in terms of location, in terms of how much they cost, in terms
Yeah.
of what kind of faculty they have. So really think carefully through on what it is, which of these is going to really add to your profile the way it stands right now, is what I would say. So you'd ask me another question. Sorry, did I
Yeah,
miss?
so I was just asking you. I think you've already answered the question that okay, what were the places that you were considering to apply for? And yeah, you aptly mentioned that. I completely agree with you on the fact that I made my decision when I got into. I had offers from Cornell, then Berkeley, Georgetown. Then SAIS at Johns Hopkins, and a couple more institutions. I did not apply to Harvard. I got into Columbia for their MPA as well as MPA DP programs as well. But what I realized at that point of time was that Columbia wasn't giving me any scholarship, and Cornell was giving me about 40% ish in scholarship. And Georgetown and Johns Hopkins were also giving me some. So my idea was, and this is what I say to everybody, that I get this question a lot that okay, should I go for an Ivy League versus a non-Ivy League? Should I go for something in Europe as opposed to the US? And my answer typically is that all of these that we are talking about, whether it is Sciences Po, whether it is LSE or Cambridge or Cornell, Columbia, Berkeley, all of these are in the top 1% of the world. So that's the first thing. And let us say that if all of these give you 1,000 units of opportunities, okay, or let's say it's entirely possible that a Columbia might give you a 1,000 units of opportunity, a Harvard might give you a 1,200 units of opportunities. Typically, for a student, our capacity of absorbing opportunities, even if we are 24/7 awake, we are attending all of the seminars and lectures and networking events, our capacities are, let's say, at 500 units. So whether you're going to a 1,000 unit college or a 1,200 unit college, it doesn't matter because your complete capacity is just 500. So for any of these colleges, the resources that you have are endless, and if you just keep working at it, you'll be able to chart your own career. That's you the resources for the college are never going to run out. That's something that I learned over here.
That's super. I think you've captured it bang on. That, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Madhavika, let me also ask you. There's this question that I get a number of times. What's the difference between an MPP program versus an MPA? So there are two types of questions: MPP versus an MBA. So should I go for a business degree or should I go for a policy degree? Let's discuss that. And then perhaps if I could get your views on, in Colombia, especially, you have your MPA, MPA, TP, MIA, etc., etc. It gets pretty confusing for people. So if you could just talk about that a little.
Sure. I'll answer your first question first,
Sure.
but I know that you'll be able to answer it best since you've lived both an MBA and an MPA, so
Hmm.
you can give a first-hand experience. But I
Sure.
would like to reiterate that, as you said, this whole thing about this largely predominantly Indian mentality of MBA, we'll do an MBA and then
Yeah.
we'll figure it out because it's a good backup, and so let's just do the MBA and figure out uh, what to do after. This is a very old school way of thinking, and I would really encourage people here that if you know that you are passionate about wanting to work in development and wanting to work in policy, you have to recognize that the fundamental things that are motivating you in your life and in your career are very removed from
Hmm.
what is motivating someone who's doing an MBA. So first, at a very existential level, you have to recognize that your
Yeah.
life motivations and career motivations are very removed from someone doing an MBA. And so we first start with that acknowledgement, but then, which is more existential, but then let's actually hone in on the professional hard skills
Yeah.
aspect of it. The hard skills, the professional network, the access, the kind of lifelong opportunity for learning and mentorship that you're going to get from an MPA, if that is your career interest, is vastly different from an MBA. And I do think that if we want the development sector and policy sector to become more professionalized, become more serious, be taken more seriously, offer higher salaries, then we need to get serious about getting investing in that MPA degree to really hone our skill sets, to really equip ourselves with the kind of thinking and with the kind of skills required to solve the problems in our sector, which, just to be completely black and white, an MBA is not equipping you with.
Yeah.
You are not thinking about policy outcomes. You are not thinking about how to make the world a better place. And those are the kind of, and it's, we talk about it in a very fluffy way, but there are very hard skills that go behind achieving those outcomes, and we need to
Absolutely.
take those skills very seriously. So I think it should be, to all the listeners here, it should be very clear that if these are the things that motivate you, then you should absolutely invest in an MPA degree and not get caught up in that narrative of MBA kar lenge and then we'll
And
figure
then
out later.
dekhenge kya hona hai.
देखेंगे क्या होता है, exactly. So yeah, so that's the first thing. The second one, yes, it's super confusing. You're looking at, MBA so easy. You're looking at 10 schools, they all say MBA.
Yeah.
With our sector, you're looking at 10 of the tops, what Arpit very rightly called the 1% programs around the world. And you're like, what is going on? One is called an MALD, one is called
Yeah.
an MPAID, one is called an MIA, one is called an MA. It's a jargon soup. Like, it is absolutely
Absolutely.
confusing. And that's a problem. Like, our development sector, we make things so complicated for everyone. But just so that everyone on this call is crystal clear, in essence, there is absolutely no difference between
Yeah.
all of these degrees. They might call it whatever, each school might give it its own name. I don't know why they do it, maybe to create a USP for themselves. But all of these programs at the core, at the heart, at the essence, are exactly the same. There might be a few differences, minor differences here and there. Like,
Yeah.
there's some programs which have more quantitative requirements, so you might have to take a couple more advanced stats courses. But that's not to say that another program, you can't make it more quantitative and
Absolutely.
choose to take those advanced classes. One might have a language requirement, which for Indians is not a big deal because most of us are fluent in more than one or two languages. Some might have like a capstone component where you have to do a real life project. So it's like all very, very minor differences. But the good thing about all of these 1% programs that we're talking about is that you can pretty much customize all of those to be what you want them to be: more
Yeah.
quantitative, less quantitative, more practical, less practical. So in essence, there is absolutely no difference between all of these programs.
Absolutely, absolutely. That was quite spot on, Madhavika. Uh, let me talk about my first issue between the MBA and an MPP MPA degree. Uh, okay, yes, I will also talk about MBA plus MPP. Kajol, thank you so much. I'll cover this in this. So. Uh, First is I went for my MBA degree, and something that I would not recommend anybody to do for any graduate degree, unless, of course, you're planning to go straight into a PhD. But even then, I would not recommend you to go for a graduate degree without any work experience. So, Madhvika, as you said that you went for your MPA degree at Columbia after having worked in DC. I went for my business administration degree right out of like I finished my I give my last exam at Kirodimal College for my third year, and the next day I'm in Symbiosis, Pune. So that was a mistake when I look at it right now, because all of these are practice oriented degrees that we are talking about. And unless you have been exposed to real life scenarios, you yourself will not be able to build that knowledge inside your head, because these are really adult learning environments where they are not coming with a mentality of just feeding you with knowledge. You have to build your own knowledge. They'll give you some frameworks for that. So uh, now, having said that, what I realized between the difference between an MBA and an MPP degree, the first is what you rightly touched upon, Madhvika. It's a completely different logic, completely different mindset. For any MBA professional, they are trained over and over again that the bottom line, the top line matters the most. So it's eventually profits that matter the most. Okay. And nowadays, obviously, there's a huge trend of enveloping your organization's vision, mission towards sustainability, all of that. But then, trust you me, no company is going to have those visions in if their profits aren't flowing. So the logic is that all efficiencies, all decisions, all risks must lead to greater profits. That's the MBA version of thinking about things. The MPP or an MPA version of thinking about things is that, the profit is greater social good, greater social cooperation, etc., etc. Okay, so absolutely different logics in the first place. Now, the second thing is that an MBA essentially trains you to organize or to make a company successful. So it's an inside out sort of a training that you get, that the eventual aim of a CEO is to make your own company successful. Okay. For an MPA MPP degree, the focus is on getting a particular policy outcome in place. Okay, or getting a particular social outcome in place. Now, you may still be tied to an organization. You may still be focused on making an organization successful, but the idea is that there are just so many stakeholders, there's so much complexity, things are not super straight cut. So you need to work with making a whole ecosystem successful. That's the idea. So that's the second difference between MPA and MBA. The third difference, as Madhvika also said, is in terms of skills. So now, as an MBA, you learn skills in marketing, in human resource management, in finance, in operations. Frankly, I see that the MBA skills could well be a subset of the MPA MPP skills, because even when you're in MPA MPP programs, I took a course in systems thinking, which is pure operations, right? Then you can take courses in accounting and finance. So climate finance, public finance, those are courses which are always available, teach you, almost exactly the same skills. You can take courses in public communications and PR and marketing. So that's your marketing bit, and human resource management courses are also quite abundant. So you can go into an MPA MPP program and pick these courses up, and a lot of times those courses are foundational. So they, it's almost compulsory to at least take those core courses. And then you can take other courses such as, how do you do your agriculture management, how do you do your behavioral economics, things like that. So I think that, in terms of just skills and courses, MBA could well be a subset of an MPA, and I'm sure some MBAs might challenge it. I'm more than happy to discuss. The second bit about MPP, MPA, etc., etc., I absolutely agree with Madhavika. I think in an ideal world, if one were to make things easy for understanding, MPP would have been for good policy design, MPA would have been for good policy implementation and administration. But the fact is that none of these labels really matter. Even in colleges which offer MPA, MPP, MPA, DP courses, you'll find a huge number of courses which are common. So huge number of electives and core courses that you can take, which are common. And then there are minor differences, as Madhavika absolutely and rightly talked about. So,
And to
yeah,
add to that, Arpit, I'll just, in terms of, most of our audience is looking to get into master's programs, but thinking about what these titles mean after you're done. Let me tell you, no, when you are submitting your resume or CV to a company post MPP, MPA for recruitment purposes, nobody is going to,
oh no,
all they'll know is that you have a professional MPA, MPP degree from a good university, and nobody's going to check whether it's an MPA, MPP. That
yeah,
has literally never come up in recruitment and hiring. So
absolutely.
I can assure everyone here that post policy degree, nobody in the real world cares whether it's an MPA, MIA, MALD. So
Yeah, or even an MA in public policy or an MDev, it doesn't matter from
it,
recruitment
it doesn't
purposes.
matter. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, just to answer Kajol's question on MPA plus MBA, you can go for both. And there are a lot of people who do that because they are still not sure whether to work in the public or the private sector. My recommendation would be stick with one. There are MBAs working in the development field. There are development sector graduates who are working in businesses. So, that you can certainly go for. Okay. Now let's look at other questions which are there. So let me take this question over here from Thriti. So Thriti is asking, Madhavika, could you also talk about the impact of the, okay, you have answered this one already. Nimish, let's see. In a general sense, what is the type of profile required to get into an MPA program in terms of years of work X, type of sector, academics? So Madhavika, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I can start. So the good news for everyone here is that all of these, unlike what were the style of college admissions that we're used to in India, it's very different
Yeah,
in the US, in Europe, and even in Singapore, because the good thing about especially the top colleges, the top 1%, 5%, 10%, is that they actually pride themselves on having a very diverse cohort. So they actually pride themselves on curating a class of people who are as different as possible,
yeah,
which means the good news with that is that there is no straw man profile that you can build of someone who is well suited for an MPA degree, because take Columbia for an example, as an example, which is the the CEPA MPA program is one of the largest cohorts in of policy among the policy schools. It's one of the largest cohorts, and literally you find people like I would be a more traditional profile, right?
mhm,
Someone who kind of was building up to this anyway, has a undergraduate degree in the social sciences, worked in a large international NGO. All my internship experiences were in policy development sector. So I'm a very traditional
yeah,
MPA profile. So of course they want people like me with the more traditional profile. But then there were also people like Arpit who have done an MBA, worked in finance, worked in management consulting. There are people who, we had a lot of engineers, people
Oh
who've
yeah.
gone to IIT, NIT, worked in, like, say hardcore corporate oil and gas, ITC, your Reliances, your TCSs, and then was switching to policy. You had journalists, you had people who were fresh out of college, very, like, completely outstanding students in college, had done
Yes.
a lot of extracurricular work in college. You had people who had worked for 15 years in say, there were some IAS officers who were taking a break to come back and do an advanced degree. So literally a huge diversity in terms of
Yeah.
experiences. What you need to keep in mind is, it doesn't matter, what I mean, of course, everyone who's here on a Monday evening, I already know you're all driven people. What you need to do is, when you're applying, you need to curate your entire, think of your entire application as a very comprehensive, holistic package, not focus too much on grades, uh, GRE. Any one component is not as important as the whole comprehensive package. And you need to make sure that you are showing through your various experiences and your profile of why it is that you feel committed to working in this sector, how you're going to be a policy, how you think you want to be a policy leader
Yeah.
later, and what it is that you want to achieve, and how your experiences so far have fed into it. So you have to build a whole narrative about your profile, and you have to basically make a marketing pitch for why you
Mhm.
are a good fit. So that is entirely in your hands, because
That
you have
story that you write in your SOP becomes
ex-
really important.
exactly, and it has to be a story. It can't be a bunch of, I was a topper in college, and
No,
then I did. It can't be like a
it can't be your
collection.
CV all over again.
Yeah, it can't be a collection of your accolades. So it has to be a very strong story where everything you have done feeds into one narrative of what it is that you hope to achieve from your masters, and what it is that you want to do after. And that's all you need to focus on. And don't get too hung up on, oh, I've only done this internship, or I had 5 points less in my GRE, things like
Yeah.
that. Forget about that. Like, that does not matter.
No, I absolutely agree, and that was probably as perfect an answer as can be. I'll just emphasize on a few points over here that a lot of people get hung up on grades. If anyone, see, I'm a history graduate, and during our times, 56% was the university topper in history. So obviously, I got a 53 something. Which, if somebody doesn't understand that context, would think that, okay, this is really low from an undergrad perspective. And my MBA, since this was one crazy MBA. If you look at my grades over there, I should not get admission into any colleges. I got into 7 or 8. So the ideas don't get too hung up on grades. Similarly, GRE. So thank you for highlighting that. And also, one example, I had people in my you know not not necessarily in my cohort, but then a class above me and a class below me. I had people who'd come out from English literature. They had been working on museums, and they want to work on art, culture, policy, and they got into the Cornell MPA program. Uh, it eventually, what they literally see in you is that if you have the passion, and if there's just this real insider trick on that uh, will you take that college's name forward? So will you look good on the institution? Will you add to the institution's reputation in the long run? Those are the typical kind of things that they're looking at. uh, okay, so I think yeah, we've answered this question. Let's look at Lavania's question. Okay, Lavania, how does one approach in deciding which degree is best suited for a public policy career? I think, Lavania, that question is already answered. There's no real difference between these degrees. Some could be more quantitative, less quantitative, uh, other focus areas. That's just a different story. Now,
Also, I
yeah,
mean, here another thing I just want to highlight here is, often again, in our Indian education system, we take set curricula as gospel, which means this is set in stone, it can't be changed. for everyone here, I want you to remember, especially when you're doing your masters, nothing in the US and in these other top 1% schools or 5% schools, nothing is set in stone. So
Yeah.
the curriculum might say XYZ, but please, if you are interested in changing it around, if you want to do one thing which is not, you really want to take this one class but it's not part of your set curriculum, please seek out your deans, seek out your advisors.
Yeah.
They will be more than happy to accommodate you. So the amazing, the intellectually liberating advantage of being in these schools is that you can customize and curate exactly how you want to. So don't feel don't feel shy, in be bold in, like, asking for what it is that you want. And
Yeah.
don't take what's written on a website or on a on a brochure as gospel. You have that freedom to change things around.
No, absolutely. And I think that's also one great problem of our own system over here in India, because I've helped set up and I've, worked with a premier Indian public policy school as, in their core management team. And I realized that the huge problem with our educational system is that we don't really believe in choice. And, some electives, one or two here and there is a different matter. I remember when I was at Cornell, I took a course in the International Relations Department, which is called the Government Department. And I took a PhD level course while I was in an MPP degree. My faculty advisor allowed it. So my specialization, for example, concentration, as we called it, was government politics and policy studies. And the types of courses I took were entirely different from another person who might be in the same specialization as well. So, like, I took courses in game theory, I took courses in international political economy. They were still counted as government politics and policy studies. And another person may have taken entirely different courses. It'll still count like that. So, they give you a lot of freedom in that sense. Okay, so let me look at Nayonika Bagchi's question. Nayonika is saying, what are the differences between development economics master's degrees and public policy degrees? I'm trying to figure out what I want to go into. I have some experience in development work and want to work in the overlap between the two fields. Madhavika, what do you think about that?
Yeah, my initial sense of this is, Nanika, is that to me, a development economics MA would be something that would be more designed or catered towards someone who wants to pursue an academic career.
Yeah.
So in terms of that, the professional aspect that you get from a public policy degree will be missing, which means, like, there won't be so many classes on practice, on policy making, and it'll be more on economics theory. So
Yeah.
so it again boils down to your career interests in what you want to do next. But again, to build off what Arpit just said, is that within, if you are someone who's doing an MPA and you become, or you are very interested in development economics theory, and this is something you want to work on in a non-academic way, but you want to pursue it, remember that within a public policy degree, there are many concentrations and specializations. So you
Yeah.
can do a purely development economics based public policy degree. So my concentration was advanced policy and economic analysis, where I was essentially doing, like, very advanced econometrics and things like that, because I wanted to build that skill set. So I would say that if you're certain that you don't want an academic degree, career, and that you're interested in a more professional career, you can do a public policy degree, but with a deep dive and a deep concentration in development economics.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had classmates who went for a DevEcon PhD after the MPP, M.P.A degree. So, those sort of concentrations in economic and financial policy, etc., they can lead you to that track. In fact, a lot of public policy graduates eventually work in the development sector as well. Madhavika is an example in Sight and Life. I have friends who are working with JPAL, ID Insights, all of these places. So, those career tracks are also open. I would, on this account, also take the next question. I Let me just quickly see whose was it about, working in BCG, etc., etc. It was somewhere Nimish. So Nimish was asking that I want to work in public sector government consulting roles, possibly McKinsey, Bain, BCG. Is MPA a viable choice? Absolutely. All MPA degrees don't necessarily lead you to the development sector. There are people who have worked, you can work for WhatsApp, Facebook, Uber. They have public policy departments. You have these consulting firms who do public sector or government consulting, and you can also be in you know uh, governance and public affairs and communications departments for companies like Mahindra or Tata, which is more like advocacy lobbying sort of roles, but then they also come in the broad ambit of public policy. So it depends on, if you know that, okay, you want to work for let's say uh, consulting for BCG, McKinsey type of things, then when you're in the MPP, MPA program, then you can certainly take courses. Like I did a consulting capstone. So in fact, took a, I did a capstone. I also took courses on which was specific to consulting, and they gave me live projects to work with county governments developing their public participation plans, economic development models, etc., etc. So you can do that very well if you're looking for Bain, McKinsey, BCG, and to work in the public or government consulting role. Then, as opposed to an MBA, I'd recommend that you go for an MPP degree over there. Let me look at the other. Lavanya is also asking, it'll be great to know in choosing which degree and college to what extent must, whether it is STEM or not, to be factored in career prospects in the USA. Okay, so Madhavika, do you want to talk about that how much?
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand where this question is coming from, because, if you're graduating with loans, you want, and with visas not being guaranteed, yes, a STEM degree does provide you with a lot of flexibility, because you do get the 3 years where you can, look for jobs and switch around and things like that. My belief though is that with a policy degree, you of course, it's not in the ambit of STEM. It's not considered in the ambit of STEM. But I would say, again, I mean, it depends, again, boils down to your career motivation, right? So if you know you want to work in public policy, then I don't know if just pursuing a STEM degree because of a visa flexibility thing is going to necessarily be a good career choice in terms of what you're learning, the network you're building. Because you also, oh, did we lose Arpit? Hey, Aditi? Am I the only one who doesn't see Arpit anymore? Arpit, hi.
Hi, sorry, I have a bad internet over here and I got dropped.
Okay, sorry. I thought it was on my side. But yeah, so Arpit, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this, but
No.
I think that the whole choosing a degree on the basis of the visa it gives you is the wrong way to approach it, because a degree is not just about the immediate 3 years after you graduate, right?
Yeah, it's
So
for a
if you think
lifetime.
it's for a lifetime, so I would think in more long-term timeframes, because the long term, like I've now been out of my degree for it's been 5 years out, about the same for Arpit. We are now beginning to see the long term payoff of the degrees we did, in terms of the kind of networks we got, in terms of, I mean, both of us have built international careers which go way beyond just the US. And
Yeah,
so I think you have to have a more long term view on what it is that you want to get out of your career, and not think of just even though it becomes so tempting to just think of that first job after graduation, but you have to realize your career is going to be 30, 40 years beyond just that first job.
absolutely. Absolutely. I would say that first is that I don't think, except for uh, one of the variants of the MPP MPA degree at Chicago, and perhaps a couple others, uh, Now, I know that Pardi at Rand has also started an MPP degree. A couple of these are STEM. Most of them would not be STEM. And typically the ones which are STEM would be, more like a tech policy concentration, tech policy degree. So if you're a tech policy person, then yes, obviously 3 years makes a lot more difference, because then finding an organization that would sponsor your H1B, etc., becomes really easy. So if you're a tech policy person, or if you are the kind of person who fits the bill for that particular degree and it's STEM, then prioritize going for the STEM one. But otherwise, just don't go to a place because it's STEM. So I'd say that go to a place where you have the best professors for the kind of concentration that you're looking at. Like if there's one thing that you need to look at, that's that. Let me take the question from Mansi. I think it's do public policy and development communication. And I think we've answered this one, that you can create your own development communication focus area once you're in one of these degrees. So it's almost similar to the questions that has been asked. Soumya is asking what sort of experience universities demand. Well, again, I think Madhavika has answered that there are these typical trajectories that you've been working in the developmental field, and then you get into public policy. But then there are different, I've had classmates, and I'm sure Madhavika has classmates who were pure, private sector business entrepreneurs. They got into public policy degree. There have been people who got in without any work experience. So, the more relevant the experience, the better. But then it's about, see, every experience can be tied to public policy. Anything that you're doing is touched by public policy. So you could, tailor it accordingly. So let me just go to the next question. Ahil is asking, Ahil is also from KMC. Hi, Ahil. Good to see another KMC over here. You wanted to apply for Sciences Po. You have internship experience. You don't have industry experience. Okay, so I think, Madhavika, it's important to discuss over here that a lot of people have this misconception that internship experience doesn't count. I think it does, but I want to hear your thoughts on that.
100%. I mean, don't. Again, this comes. I keep going back to some of our prevailing mentalities and realities in India, because again, we're all very familiar with it. But a lot of times, internships are not taken very seriously, but in India, because we see it just as a check in the box, or you just go sit somewhere for 6 weeks and get that letter or whatever. Please, nobody have this mentality. Internships are so crucial.
Yeah.
For me, even though I was in the I always knew I wanted to be in this sector. It's a large sector, as Arpit was mentioning. And it was purely through internships that I was able to do a trial and error of what I want to do within the sector, because you can be lost in this sector. And please treat your internships as an opportunity for you to immerse yourself into an organization, into a field, and understand if that is that works for you, does not work for you. So from a professional growth point of view, internships are absolutely critical. And it's the one time when you can absolutely, you have that room to fail and to experiment.
Yeah.
Which and you have to understand how important that is in your career, having that room to fail and experiment. So please take internships seriously, and not as just a check in the box, or just for that one letter of recommendation.
Yeah.
And internships add tremendously to your CV. The richer you make your internship experience, the more you'll have to write about it in a policy school application, the more you'll be able to build that story. So for me, as Arpit mentioned, I did have work experience, but it wasn't a whole lot. I only worked for a year and a half. But because I every summer, and every summer I did like a serious internship in college, and then I
Yeah.
even did things like on shorter breaks I would do things called externships, where it's
Mhm.
not even where you're just following like a professional and like, you know, shadowing them and trying to understand what they do. And I was able to really draw out from those experiences, not just for my own professional growth, but also in crafting that narrative that I applied when I was applying to policy school. So I think absolutely don't underestimate internships.
I absolutely agree with you, Madhavika. And in fact, you never know what you're learning at an internship might come in handy. Like I interned at Philips during my MBA and later at the National Commission for Scheduled Castes. So what happened was that I learned how to create vision and mission statements at Philips. I did that for a factory. Then I created the vision and mission statement for the National Commission for Scheduled Castes. So applied one thing to another. And what I learned at the National Commission for Scheduled Caste helped me accessing data and writing a lot of articles on policies related to the Scheduled Caste Prevention of Atrocities Act and things like those. So I got my publications and as a result, and a lot of my SOP was also about my experience over there. So internships are absolutely they're not some sidey sort of a thing that you're doing. They're as important as your core job responsibilities. Okay. Mm, mm, mm. Now, one question from Shrish is that Shrish is an undergrad third year art student. How can Shrish get a solid work experience to get into an IR degree? Again, Shrish, same thing. Uh, apply as an intern to as many think tanks, as many other organizations, uh, publications which are working on IR related issues. You may not become any richer by doing that, but then that's monetarily, financially, but in reality it'll add greatly to your profile. Let's take Kajol's question over here. Kajol has been accepted into NUS for MPP, and she says that it's much more affordable than the other Ivy League schools. What is your take on non-Ivy League schools? Madhavika, do you want to
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kajol, congratulations. Firstly, that's excellent.
congratulations? Yeah.
Yeah. So, a graduate school degree in an MPA, MPP is a huge investment, and I completely understand that there are huge monetary often it's a burden associated with it. So. Which is, but also, so it's a fine balance of the monetary burden plus the payoff from having that degree. So I think what I would encourage everyone is to really consider the top the top level MPA MPP degrees, which are there, and there are a lot which fall into like that top 1%, 5%. It's not just, and it goes way beyond the Ivy League. So it's not
And
just
maybe
the
on the US as well.
way beyond the US, as we'd mentioned earlier. So please don't get, yes, branding is important because this is a graduate degree that you're spending a lot of money into. And this graduate degree, a better brand also brings with it a better network, which means
Yeah.
pay off for the rest of your life, professional life, in terms of the kind of network you have. So yes, I won't tell, and I won't tell people here that do any MPA MPP degree that you get into. Absolutely not. I would encourage everyone to look at the top 5% of the programs. But let me tell you, NUS is very much in that top, I would say even the
Certainly.
top 1%. So think beyond. Maybe this whole like idea of Ivy Leagues is, it's a little, I mean, I understand where it comes from, but we have to recognize that in the policy sector there is a lot more that beyond the Ivy Leagues. Like you have
Yeah.
in the US, you have your Georgetowns, you have your Johns Hopkins, you have your Tufts, you have
Yeah.
U Chicago, you have Berkeley, and then of course outside of the US, very much NUS, Sciences Po, Hertie, LSE, Cambridge, and now I would say there's even a couple in India, like at the IIM Bangalore, I believe. There's one in ISB in Mohali. So I would say that there are
Yes.
some really good emerging MPA MPP programs also in India. So absolutely think of the top brand names, think of the top 5%, but think beyond Ivy League 100%.
No, and I agree with Madhavika. And if you are one person who's there at a Princeton or a Harvard and doesn't, let's say, leverage into the resources, the alumni networks, doesn't build relations, versus you're another person who's probably in a much newer school, let's say even Hertie, which is fairly new. But then you're extremely plugged into your faculty's research activities, you're networking, you're attending the right events and talking to the right people. Then I've seen people from Harvard, Kennedy not doing amazingly well. I've seen people from much less known schools doing amazingly well. So there's no silver bullet over there. But yes, if you have a strong brand name and if you know how to leverage it, it matters. Okay. Mm, Now let me see the other question. Pragnya. Pragnya, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, what kind of skills do you need to develop, or what skills do you need to have to choose public policy as a career? Any thoughts on this one, Madhavika? I'd say I'm thinking you need basic economics. That's something that they typically ask for. You need basic writing skills.
Yeah, I would say definitely, like most public policy programs have some level of a core class in stats and in economics. But that being said, this is not something you need to have done beforehand, because there are plenty of people coming into public policy programs who have not ever done an economics class or a stats class, and most schools offer a math camp or an econ camp at the beginning of the program, so that by the time the program starts, everyone is at the same level. But more importantly than these hard skills of like economics and stats, I think I would definitely say critical thinking and critical writing, because these are not just important skills for your master's program, but for your career. How you engage with information, how you synthesize it, how you present it. These are skills that unfortunately are not taught in Indian schools. They're not emphasized in undergrad. They're not emphasized when we are in school, and these are skills, but these are skills we can easily build up by how we consume information, how we present it, and being very critical and thoughtful about how we're engaging with information, because that, more than any hard skill that you will learn in grad school or go into grad school with, is going to serve you for the rest of your career. Because if you're an extremely smart person, but if you are not able to process and synthesize and present that information in a simple, actionable, clear, concise manner, then you're not going to get far in your career. So
absolutely. Nothing to add there. Here is one really difficult question. I find these ones really difficult, and I'm gonna therefore put it in your court, Madhavika, to begin with. So Arushi has asked us that Arushi has a bachelor's and master's degree in economics, and she's been working in the public policy sector for over 2 years. For further growth in the sector, she's been considering MPP, M.P.A from the top 1% institutes, but she's very unsure about the value addition of the degree, given that she's already in the sector. So what do you think about that? Should she go for a degree?
Tough question, Arushi. And like I said, I don't like this whole thing about being already in the sector and the additional value add. That's a bit of a misconception, because we don't do a advanced degree to want to break into a sector or to change sectors always, right? In fact, like I said, you and I, Arushi, would be the more traditional sort of people who are already in the sector, but we want to get further, which is why we want to equip ourselves with the skill set. And actually, there were a ton of people in my program who had an MA in economics already, but like I think I mentioned it previously, an MA in economics is a very academic degree, and it's tailored towards people who are considering higher academic degrees in economics. And maybe you made your MA a little more practical, had more practical experience. I'm not certain, but by and large, these are very academic degrees. And if you are certain that you want to, and if you are already beginning to see that there is some sort of a glass ceiling, or some sort of a ceiling in terms of your skill set or your managerial abilities that will prevent you from getting further in the development sector, and that this degree might add to it, then absolutely I would consider it, because I think what an MPA, MPP will offer in terms of skill set, network, and just broadening your horizons. Because again, we talk of the development sector as a monolith, but you have to realize that it's a massive, it's like saying business sector, right? What the business sector is not any one thing. Similarly, the development sector, it can be policy research, it's the whole value chain, right? It can be advocacy, policy research. You're working at a CSR of a foundation, you're working at a BCG, you're a journalist reporting on doing data driven journalism, you're a policy maker, you're in government. It is such a rich field that often it could be that, being in a master's in public policy program will give you that exposure to the full spate of that value chain in the development sector, and help you see that, okay, I am in this sector, but am I doing what I truly feel passionate about? What are the other options for me? And also remember, the development sector is constantly changing and evolving. Like, now you have tech, you have for example, like 5 years ago, you had like everyone talk about microfinance, then you had everyone talking about RCT. So it's like a constantly evolving sector, and there's a lot of things that are happening, and the sector is rapidly changing. And being in a policy program, you're going to have a front seat to all of those changes. In fact, you might even be part of that change. So I think absolutely, if this is something you think is the right point in your career to want to go into it, I think the value addition in my mind is tremendous, because it's completely different in terms of not just the skill set and the academic offerings, but also in terms of like the kind of exposure to opportunities, to people, that you're going to get in a public policy degree. So that's my 2 cents. But yeah, I don't know what you think, Arpit.
No, absolutely. I think what you said reminded me of a conversation I was having with one of the GPODS mentors who's at Oxford, Dr. Wendy Schultz, and she teaches at the US in a number of places as well. And she was saying, we were having this discussion around the practitioner versus the academic, and whether to go for a degree or just to stay in practice. She said something that made a lot of sense to me, which resonates with what you have just said, that if you are just a practitioner, you could be really, really, really good at what you're doing. The only challenge that comes in your way is that practitioners typically devise an approach that works, or they have a small toolkit of approaches that work, and they more or less stick to that toolkit. On the other hand, if you go for a master's level degree, it gives you an exposure on about the various paradigms of how that discipline has evolved, where that discipline is likely to go, what are the various skill sets which are required. So, from a longer term perspective, it prepares you for a lot of changes and ups and downs, and exposes you to a lot of facets of your discipline. And, that's sort of the thing what you just said. So I'll probably just quote Wendy and agree with you and move on to the next question here. Okay, so let me see. I'm skipping over a few so that we are not repeating the same thing over and over again. Aishwarya Banerjee. Okay. Aishwarya Banerjee is asking, how relevant are foreign degrees for people wanting to work in the Indian development sector? That's a good question. Yeah, I think my thoughts on that, Aishwarya, is that in an ideal world, it should not be the case where foreign degrees are just considered a lot better. I would say it's not about foreign degrees. It's mostly about, the colleges, the institutions that you're graduating from. my personal experiences being involved with the Indian academia as well is that, we are still stuck with a very old school method of teaching where, there are not so many choices, options available in terms of, your uh, electives. And then somehow I also feel that, we, in some Indian degrees, we try to get so much squashed in that a person is supposed to know each and everything, that eventually when you come out you probably know very less about a lot, and that becomes problematic. And somehow in India it's just that we are getting there, slowly but surely. But if you look at the quality of training right now, if you look at the top 1% of the institutes, there's not anyone from India which is there as of now. But there's a lot of promise in, let's say, ISB or an IIM or an NLS, Bangalore. Yeah, so that's my answer. I don't know, Madhavika, what do you think about that?
Yeah, the question is, how helpful is a foreign degree if you want to work in the Indian context, right?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. So I think you've given. I think I'll just complement what you've said,
sure.
where essentially, I think in terms of when you're thinking of a a good public policy degree, what it should do is be able to equip you with the skill set, and the skill set, the network, the mentality to be able to work in any context. So for example, like my first job after my master's was in India,
Mhm.
in policy research. Then I moved to another my current job at Sight and Life, where my first project was to work in Indian government. I was seconded to the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, working out of central government office. um, Very different context. And now my role has evolved into a global role where I'm managing projects in 16 countries, including India. And in each of these various, like, whether it's policy research, which is a more academic kind of a setting, whether it's in central government, or whether it's working in 16 countries with, now I work with the UN, with government, with and implementing organizations, with large NGOs, with donors like Bill and Melinda Gates. A good public policy degree should equip you to work in any context and with any number of stakeholders, because it we have to remember that a degree is not providing you with, the degree will not tell you that this is the administrative setup in India, this is how you work with Indian government. It's going to give you the skill set to be able to engage with whatever information you're presented with in the Indian context, analyze it, synthesize it, use it in a way that is going to make you very, very effective. So
Yeah.
no degree should be treated as a way to get a specialization in a country or a context. I think that will be not a good use of your. You can actually, a lot of these programs have like, I did a class on political economy of South Asia, so you can do regional deep dives and maybe take one or
Yes.
two classes that help you understand the region and the context better. Like, we at Columbia, we had some of the foremost Indian thinkers teaching, like Arvind Panagaria, Jagdish Bhagwati. People, you can take classes with them, but I think it won't, in my advice is, it's not a good use of your time to do a deep dive into a region or a context, uh, in lieu of building skill sets that'll serve you in your long term career, and in being able to really be an international expert. So that's what I would say.
No, absolutely, absolutely agree on that, Madhvika. Because regional expertise matters, but then also please do take into account that each region is changing, and the region what it is right now may not remain the same 10 years down the line. And these degrees are really preparing you for the long run. So even I took courses with Kaushik Basu. I used to take time with Ravi Kanbu, sit with him. But the thing is that, okay, I got to learn a lot about India, but then the thing is that I have to understand those basic frameworks and the basic mental models to navigate through these complex policy situations, and then I can learn the context wherever I go. That's the idea. Let me take a question which has been highlighted both by Nimish and Kajol. This is the ROI question. This is the big ROI question that we typically get. Kajol is asking, is it okay to spend 1.5 crores for a public policy degree in the US? Nimish is asking, you know, not much information is available about the kind of salaries post an MPA. So, I would like to know the range of salaries which an MPA holder with a 3 to 5 years of work can make after passing out. Okay, so Madhavika, do you want to go ahead with this? I think I have done some thinking around that, so I'll also want to add to this one.
I think then you should start and I'll add to
Okay, cool. So, see, there are a number of ways of looking at this thing. First is, the more jovial way, and, I say this more jokingly, that we think of education in ROI perspectives, and education is an end in itself. So from that, seemingly profound perspective, I joke with people that, you don't look at the mileage when you're buying a Rolls Royce, right? Because that's the relevance of quality education. But jokes apart, I can see that there is obviously a lot of reason, and I was personally looking at ROI questions very seriously because I was absolutely confused between a Columbia or a Berkeley and a Cornell, and I went to Cornell because they gave me a good scholarship, and amongst other reasons, this was obviously a very big reason. The thing over here is that yes, the amount of money that you're spending matters, but please also know that in terms of your long-term career capabilities, okay, you're probably spending 1.5 crores over here. You have to think that, in my longer term, I'll be able to earn a lot more because of this degree. Even if you're taking a loan. So let's say if you take a loan, typically your monthly salaries would be, your monthly loan installment payment would, EMI would be about 50,000 rupees to 60,000 rupees. And there's a high chance that you'll be earning a lot more than that, even if you have a package of anywhere between 1 to 3 lakh a month after coming back to India. 50,000 would not pinch you, especially after you've graduated from these places. You'll be happy that, okay, you can afford this much, even for a long loan cycle. In fact, Barack Obama, who went to Columbia and Harvard, paid his student loan installments until the age of 50. I would say it kind of worked out well for him. So that's one thing. The other thing is about salaries, the range. There is, nobody would give you the range because there is no definite range. Because if, I am coming from, let's say, an art history background who's worked in museums, and if I want to work in jobs which are going to be in art history and museums, that industry will have a very different, pay scale, as opposed to, let's say, I have been working in, corporate finance, and I'm doing a degree which prepares me for a public policy role related to how do I, ensure corporate governance or corporate financial responsibility on the Wall Street. So, both of these career trajectories would be absolutely different. And, these are different industries, these are different skills, and people are coming in with work experience that could range from 0 to, 10 to 15, just like in our fellowship. People ask that, okay, what amount of work experience do you typically have? And it's hard to answer that because, it's not a place where you're getting a cookie cutter sort of a profile. You want a diverse profile, which means that diversity of outcomes is also there. So that's my 2 cents on this. But what do you think, Madhavika?
Yeah, Arpit, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, again, we need to think of long-term time frame. So now I've been out of grad school for 5 years. So now I can actually see how me and all my classmates are actually coming up towards the end of like the loan repayment, and how, how even, I mean, we were talking about Obama, who paid off his loans well into his 40s and 50s. But I'm already beginning to see my classmates pay off their loans within 5 years. And
5 to 6 years. Yeah.
yeah. And also, yeah, like you said, you know, this sector, this development policy sector is not yet as professionalized as, say, the finance sector, right, which has a
Yeah.
very specific hiring cycle. Everybody knows broadly what the salary ranges are. So if you want management consulting, it'll be so much. If you go into corporate, it'll be so much. But we don't have those same reference points, and I know that uncertainty can be very unsettling, especially if, as a young person who's going in with all of this debt, all of these loans. But again, what I can share now is, because we've been out for 5 years, and my program was a big program, so I have friends in a variety of different kind of jobs and
Oh
roles.
yeah.
Sure, I mean, maybe the first year or two, maybe it was difficult to find exactly the kind, because we don't have those same kind of hiring cycles. Maybe it was
Yeah.
hard for them to find the right kind of job, maybe get the salary they want. But by and large, now that we are 5 years out, I honestly couldn't tell you a single friend who is not settled in, like, well
Yes.
settled in terms of where they are at in their career, how much they're making. And most people have so again, I would encourage I know it's very hard, but I would encourage those slightly longer term time frames. And in the longer term, I can assure you that it is absolutely worth it. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that this is probably the most worthwhile investment you're going to make in your life,
In
in
your
terms of,
life. Yes.
yeah, in terms of the kind of payoff it's going to have for the rest of your life. And so that's one. And then secondly, I would also encourage people, the good thing about a lot of at least the US based MPA, MPP programs are that even if you might not get need-based scholarships when you're entering, there is a lot of merit-based scholarship that's available in your second year, or other, which are usually tied to like some kind of a job. Like maybe you have to teach, maybe you have to help grade papers of undergraduates, maybe you just have to sit at a reception somewhere and answer
Yeah.
phone calls. But there is, so please be, again, I think in a US setting, it all boils down to your proactivity, because the resources are there, the opportunities are there. It comes down to how committed and proactive you are to pursuing it. So I was able to get a merit-based scholarship
Hmm.
in my second year for both semesters, because I was very proactive about pursuing it and talking to
Yeah.
different professors and networking. So yeah, keep your eye out, keep an eye out. Even if you have loans, keep an eye out for other opportunities where you can get some kind of help and support.
No, the TA ships and RA ships could be really useful, and certain TA ships, RA ships come with a complete tuition waiver for that particular semester as well. So it's important to keep an eye out on that. But then you need to be a very aware sort of person. Just keep your ears to the ground if you want to come across those. It's not as if somebody's going to post it on notice board and ask you to apply for it. Okay, let me just quickly, we are in our last 7 minutes. So let me quickly scroll down some questions. So difference between an IR degree and MPA degree, I think my quick 2 cents would be IR is a pol science degree, but then MPP, MPA can also, you can build your own focus area into IR related stuff. And nowadays, especially things like political risk management or, just international corporate affairs, those sort of things have a lot of jobs wherein you can have a focus within an MPP degree to a more internationalist sort of a profile and work in those jobs. So that's that. Uh, Lavanya is asking, having had experience as a corporate finance lawyer to foray into public finance, any insights on which of the top 1% colleges and the type of degree would this be best suited for? Okay. Uh,
Sorry, it's corporate finance too. It's a lawyer.
she's a corporate finance lawyer and she wants to get into MPP, and she's asking which of the top 1% of the colleges would be a good one. What I can show you very quickly, and I had pulled this out, I can probably share my screen really quickly, was how I decided on which colleges that I want to apply for. So if you are able to look at my screen over here, you'll see that, I was looking at a number of things in each of these, that, okay, this is the college, this is the course, this is the deadline, this is the job experience that they need, what is the students per class, what are some other remarks, like there's this MALD in Tufts and Master of International Business at Tufts, they need some international experience, etc., etc. So I was writing all of these things down, and then, just create an Excel sheet where okay, this is the average cost. I don't know what crazy calculations I was doing over there. I don't decipher this, but then you can easily figure out, when you look at the professors in a particular college and look at their publications. So a Georgetown, for example, could be a great place for an international affairs sort of a degree, because they have a lot of professors who are focused on that. Cornell is really, really good for their agriculture policy, for uh, environmental policy, things like that. Colombia is really known for its international development sector, professors and things like that. Now, all of these would have stalwarts, but some would have more stalwarts than the other in a particular field. So you'll have to check exactly, the faculty profile that there is. Okay, so Madhavika, we also have a question related to SOP. So I'm just going to read this out, and here it'll be nice to hear from you, which is Ahil Sheikh is asking, is there any way we can get an example for a great SOP? Very informative answers about how our SOP needs to be. But it'll be amazing to catch a glimpse. So I don't think I have my SOP ready over here. But probably Madhavika and I can talk about, how we structured our SOP, if that works for you, Madhavika.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And actually, when people ask me this question about sharing examples and sharing my SOP specifically, I actually always encourage people to do their own first cut without looking at anyone else's, because all these schools, especially the top 1%, 5% schools, they look for authenticity, because you have to understand, everyone who applies to these schools, it's already a self-selected pool of very smart and very driven people. So the difference between who they're accepting is so marginal that authenticity really wins out. Because if you're going to do a very contrived or a very if you're going to do a type of story that they've seen from 5 other Indians already, that's not going to.
That's why I typically don't go for consultants.
Exactly. Exactly. Do not work with consultants. I don't want to call it a scam, but it is I think maybe for undergrad, yes, but I think at a graduate school level, when most of us have the wherewithal to know ourselves and to know exactly why we're doing a grad degree, I would say that please craft your own story and have it be as authentic as possible. And once you have a first cut of your story, then maybe look at examples to see what others are saying, but not with the intention of, she has 5 things more and I don't. That does not matter. What you basically, I would say, the core things that you need to focus on is that the core things you should focus on is that what are your motivations, on a more existential level, who you are, because you want to share with the people in the admissions office who you are, right? They don't know you, and you have to share who you are at a very existential level before, and they don't want to know who you are as in, this is the college I went to, this is the job I work. No, who are you as a person? What are your motivations? And then what have you done largely in your life to be able to service those motivations, right? So and here, we don't have to present a perfect picture. You can say, okay, this is what motivated me, but then I got off on the wrong track and went into this, but then these were the lessons I learned to come back to my core motivation. So feel free. In fact, it's very good to make yourself vulnerable and talk about pitfalls and what are the lessons you were able to learn from it. And then what are the experiences you've had in your life that you think make you a good fit for that college. But then you also have to remember that to each college you apply to, they need to understand why you're a good fit for that particular college. So typically
Mhm.
what I would do is that in one paragraph in your SOP will be modifiable, where you pick up very specific things related to, say if you're applying to 5 colleges, you would pick up very specific things related to those 5 colleges, and in that one
Yeah.
paragraph you would change it and tailor it to why that college and their offerings are a good match with you and what you bring to the table. So make sure that, like, the rest of it can be one template of who you are, your story, your journey, but make sure that there, one of the last paragraphs is a strong endorsement of, okay, college X, you are offering me A, B, and C. Pick up
Yes.
classes, pick up classes, pick up professors, pick up internships. The more specific you get, the better, because that shows them that you have done your research, you are truly interested, and you have not created one generic essay that you are forwarding to 30 colleges. And then, yeah, so your story should be the same, but make sure that you also bring in an aspect of that particular college and why it is that you want to go there and why it's a good fit for you. So I'll leave it at that.
Sure. Well, couple of things over here. One is a quick warning. Do not, in the hurry of applying, to take a lot of time when you're applying. I've seen people make this blunder that they've written the wrong college's name and submitted their SOPs. You will not be able to edit it once it's submitted. So you need to read it twice, thrice. Do not apply to more than one college in a day. Okay, so you need to time this accordingly. Also, that applies to GRE. Give your GRE, somewhere around July, August, so that if you don't get a great score, and GRE scores don't matter unless they are, you had a bad day and your score is really, really bad. But let's say if you had a bad day, then you should have that buffer time of 5 weeks. That's when you can take your GRE the next time. Fortunately, I didn't have to do it, but then I took that buffer time. I took my GRE in August, so I was able to, I got a good score, but even if I hadn't, I would have had a second chance by December. Now on SOPs, I absolutely agree with Madhavika. Uh, I think my last paragraph was that editable paragraph all the time, that, okay, this is the professor, these are the courses, these are the publications that I've read, etc., etc. Okay, so that's really important that you do that. The other thing is that in your SOP, you should start, and, a lot of times it also becomes like, generating a story which may not be as uniform in reality as it might look on the SOP, but then talk about your motivations on why you, or how you uh, came to came where you are, and why you came to the conclusion that you want to uh, study public policy at the graduate level. So all of the things that you've done should eventually tie into that story. And you don't have to talk about each and every internship you've done. You don't have to talk about each and every achievements that you've had. Just focus on the relevant ones, which create a good hook to your story. That's really, really important over here. uh,
Yeah, I agree. And even if, say, for example, you have a 2-month internship experience and you have a 2-year job experience, but there's something in that internship experience
yes.
that was so landmark or so life altering, feel free to, like, add that into your story, because they will also separately get your resume and CV, so they will know what are the things you've done.
Yeah.
In your SOP, your focus should not be on marketing yourself in terms of presenting everything, but in terms of being able to highlight, like, really key things, landmark things in your life, and build on that narrative of your life. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Absolutely. I think we are coming to a close for this, but then let us close it, Madhvika, with one aspect or one advice that has not been covered until now, or something that people haven't asked until now. For me, that would be things related to, how do you, like, I see a lot of people struggling with recommendations. Like, I've seen people where, they have reached out to a potential professor or somebody who is supposed to write a recommendation letter for them, but then at the last moment the professor forgot or something like that. So make sure, first of all, is that you're giving enough heads up, enough time to people who are supposed to write your recommendation letters. If you're applying to 7, 8, 9 colleges, typically that's how you do. Some are aspirational, some are within reach, some are safety. So once you apply like that, then you would eventually have 8 to 9 colleges that you're applying to in most cases, and that is a lot of burden on a recommender, and you have 3 recommenders typically to deal with. So if you're submitting 27 recommendation letters in total, then you need a lot of coordination with the recommenders. You need a lot of leeway with the lead time with the recommenders. So a is that your recommenders should be people who you have a close enough relationship with that you can literally just follow up with them and get them to submit it. B, uh, it doesn't matter that a person does not have to be super famous, although if they're accomplished then it helps, but then you need somebody who can really write an insightful recommendation about you, not just a run of the mill recommendation that this person was good, the behavior was good, and he was professional, she was professional. You don't need that. You need the recommender to give specific instances where you contributed or where they were impressed by you. So you need people who can give specific comments, and that's probably the most important thing that they're looking at. Yeah, so I think my advice is in terms of recommendation, academic recommendation. At least one will need to be academic. It depends from school to school. Like LSE demands that both the recommendations should be academic. Most of the US schools would say 3 recommendations. You choose your mix, and at least one should be academic. So when I did it, I think for most of my colleges, I had 1 academic, 2 professionals. Some people I've seen have 2 academic, 1 professional. It depends. But you need people who can, write a thorough recommendation letter for you. So yeah. Another thing is that, treat it almost like a, at least towards the later time, treat applications as a 9 to 5 job. You meet people, this is one thing that Ishan, who's my partner at GPODS, says, that when you meet people who have been through those colleges, etc., you should literally have a shine and a twinkle in your eye, and you should talk to them. You should understand each and every aspect. Even if you don't have specific questions, you should just talk to them and understand how that place feels like, looks like, etc., so that you kind of get the vibe. You kind of start thinking that when you start thinking like them, it'll reflect in your writings. So that's important. Yeah. And over to Madhavika. Anything you think we may have not covered but could be good advice?
I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think I'll just reiterate one of the common themes that we've heard throughout this conversation today. And I think it's important to reiterate because I think for everyone who's here right now, I think the next few years, when you're applying, when you're in grad school, right after grad school, you'll be making a lot of decisions. And again, and this is something I've learned from myself and my friends, that we tend to think in very short term time frames when making important decisions. So whether that's before, whether that's during, whether that's after, and especially when you're a
Yeah.
young person, you think in very short, urgent time frames. But please, I want all of you to remember that any decisions you make, whether it's about where you end up going, about what classes you're choosing while you're there, what internships you're choosing while you're there, what kind of a job you choose right out of college. Think of everything in a more long term time period. Think of your career,
Yes.
the next 30, 40 years of your life as your career. And everything you do, try to be mindful of how it's going to add, not to the next 3 years, not to the next 5 years, but also to a much longer term. And I think that
Absolutely.
that usually helps us overcome a lot of like this urgent distress that we feel about like a lot of different things. So yeah, I would just like to reiterate that point.
No, and to build on that, think of it in longer terms, which also means that when you're there, then think of the networks that you're building as people whom you'll be leaning on for the rest of your life. Think of the professors you're interacting with as people who'll open newer opportunities for you for the rest of your life. So think of everything that you're doing. Those 2 years or that 1 year that you're there for is probably the one thing that you'll be known for many years in the future. So uh, you know hopefully you'll be known for many more bigger things as well than your graduate degree. But then the fact of life is that you will be known for the graduate degree for many years in your life. Okay. Two more things over here is that on the 10th we'll be holding a similar but separate session for LLM candidates, LLM applicants. There'll be a different set of speakers, uh, and who folks who are preparing for LLM degrees, who are lawyers and who want to go outside. That session is for them, and you'll receive updates about that if you subscribe to our website www.gpods.org. And we also want to take this opportunity to just showcase what we are doing with the GPODS Fellowship. What I said is almost like a mini MPP IR sort of a bridge program that we have. Also great for mid-career professionals who want to transition into this field and understand, what this is all about. So, that's the kind of experience which is more global, which is more, at par with the top 1% sort of schools that we've built over here. So, and Madhavika, I have been talking to you about the fellowship, and I thought that this will also be a good opportunity for you to, take a look at what our fellowship is all about. So, if I may request Aditi to share the screen and just show us a short video on what the GPODS Fellowship is all about. You are not really a student. We are not really teachers. We are all coming together in a community of fellowship, and that's the reason why we call it a fellowship, where we think that everybody makes knowledge or builds knowledge based on the ideas that they already have in their mind.
The problem is greenhouse gas emissions that affect the temperature of the climate.
You have to go back to the basics each time you feel you run into an ambiguous situation. And that's where things like critical thinking and problem solving and root cause problem solving comes in. For example, it starts with defining first what the problem is rather than getting into solving it.
We're seeing the limits of the multilateral system as it was conceived 75 years ago being reached. And you see a big fight going on many levels, including these disarmament affairs. On, let's say, I would say especially 3 levels. Now we see fights going on here in the UN, including on disarmament affairs. The first is on language, the second is on money, and the third one is on positions.
Companies like Microsoft is a good example that have committed even not just to become net zero, but they want to sort of offset their historic emissions as well. So those are incredibly ambitious targets, and that's good. We want that ambition, we want that awareness.
Policy making body on environment at the same level with the General Assembly for all other issues globally. But for environment, it established the United Nations Environment Assembly.
ION term, IOI, or impact on investment. So that's essentially what this, your management really should all be about. You're trying to maximize the impact on investment.
The fact that the G7 came together and pledged an additional 1 billion doses of the COVID vaccine next year on top of the 1 billion that's already been promised. This is important. Of course, there's been criticism saying that's not enough. Of course it's not enough, but still that's 1 billion.
You might define it as coordinated and synchronized action that often deliberately targets democratic states and institutions.
As an international relations and diplomacy, it often is very important, to be heard, to be able to state your case and your position. Whether you get it in the end is a different story, but in order, you have to be transparent, you have to be inclusive. And that was something that Copenhagen was not. As you perhaps know, there were like backdoor negotiations, but Paris was very, very open, very inclusive.
Every year I went to the NASCOM annual conference. Fantastic. You met people who were thinking out of the line, out of the box. There's not a small box, but a huge box and so forth. It shows that India has a capacity to develop a global industry that can service the whole world, the whole corporate world.
New technologies are emerging and being developed at the faster pace than ever. So I do think that we are going to need to do a kind of a bigger job than we are doing today in a way to get new kinds of arms control in a broad sense to work on, to discuss about the role of these.
Science of attribution, of being able to say, has changed so much that now you are able to look at the probability of events happening and the link to climate change, the link to fossil fuels. We're seeing incredible things happening in courts these days.
GPODS has helped us build such a rich network of professionals who are truly global and, are actually working at the cutting edge of solving some real policy problems.
The ability of GPODS to actually stimulate us intellectually is what best qualifies and characterizes it. I feel personally, for me, it has really broadened my horizons.
So grateful to have had this opportunity over the last 3 months to get to know you all, and also just have such incredible mentorship and intellectual stimulation. Coming out of grad school, I think I was really lacking that in my life, and to be able to have such dynamic conversations. And
I would like to look at a case study of Cambodia in Thailand. In Thailand, in 2018, the government actually set aside a social security program that also provides an health security for the 1/5% of the urban poor, and it is called National Health Equity Program. And in this equity program, it comes with 2 facets. Number one, it's helped to guarantee the health security of the people of the 1/5% of urban poor and the poorest of the poor in the country, and also help to empower the hospitals and the district hospitals with equipment, with facilities that could aid them in attending to the urban poor.
As I said, Venezuelan migrant women, and they are caught in between a situation where their original healthcare system of their home country is not adequate to meet the needs and expectations of COVID-19. So they historically have been migrants to neighboring countries such as Colombia, but because of the restrictions on equal access to healthcare as well as other universal human rights in Colombia, it becomes a precarious situation for these migrant women who are looking for safe jobs, who are trying to avoid gender-based violence, which unfortunately is very frequently occurring over there, on top of not having that healthcare access, and are actually, in most cases, forced to return home to Venezuela. And during this pandemic, it's not good. And generally,
it was an amazing experience, because I would say I've come from a totally quantitative background, and this program has given my mind some great wings, because I've met mentors from different walks of life and transcending many different avenues of human endeavor. So in that sense, I would say it's total diversification, and very, very thankful to GPODS and to the fellow mates.
All right, thank you, Aditi. And with this, we come to an end of our interaction today. I'd like to give a big thank you to Madhavika from GPODS, GPI, and our larger community. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming in and getting your questions with us. And I'm more than happy to be in touch. I've posted my email address over here in the chat box. You can also add me up on LinkedIn. Again, thanks, Madhavika. I know you're traveling right now, but then between your travels, you were able to take time for this. So I really, really appreciate it. And always such a pleasure just interacting with you.
Likewise, Arpit, thank you so much for having me on. And I absolutely love meeting this very, very lively group of people here. So thanks. And I'm also happy to connect on LinkedIn with everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Madhavika. You have a nice day. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.